Hello and welcome to this video where we will show how to protect applications and microservices using FortiWeb. For this we will use FortiWeb as a container deployed in the same cluster that we want to protect. So together with Istio we will direct all of the incoming traffic to FortiWeb, and once it is analyzed and filtered it will be directed to every relevant microservice. So the first thing to do is to access our application to check that it's working fine, and for that we will use Istio Ingress URL and port. We can generate some traffic, and with the help of a K8s we can see how the traffic is flowing from Istio Ingress to the application frontend and from there to the application backend. So for deploying FortiWeb, we have this simple YAML file that contains the deployment specification of the FortiWeb image that we want to use. And we ask Kubernetes to apply this YAML configuration to carry out this deployment. And afterwards, we can check that it was successfully applied by running some CLI commands to check both the deployment and the pod that now contains a FortiWeb. We also need to deploy a couple of services for management and user traffic. Again, we make use of YAML text files to define the specification of these services. Now we have just checked that the management service has been deployed correctly, and then we continue with the service to allow user traffic, where the port 80 is used for this purpose. Again, after deployment, we make sure that the services have been properly created by asking Kubernetes CLI. And finally, we have to modify the Istio specification to route the traffic from Ingress to our FortiWeb user traffic service, including the right port. In this case, the Istio virtual service was already created, and we just changed the specification to point it to a different endpoint, which is our new FortiWeb. The next step is to configure our new FortiWeb, and for that we need to get the IP and port of the management service that we created for FortiWeb. We have to open a browser with that information, and then we have to configure a few parameters in FortiWeb. We start with a virtual server on the single port that we have. We can name it VS1. And then we continue with a server pool. And for the server pool, we have to choose the destination service, which in our case is the product page application that we want to secure. So we must get the IP and port for that service from our CLI by asking Kubernetes. We can populate that data with information obtained from Kubernetes. And then we have our server pool configured. And finally, the last step is to create a policy that will allow traffic by combining all of the items that we just configured. We also need to enable HTTP and HTTPS traffic. And of course, we want to select a web protection profile. Now we need to check that our application is still accessible from Istio entry URL, but in this case our request will go through FortiWeb first, without any significant difference from the user point of view. If we use K8s, we can check that FortiWeb has been deployed and traffic is flowing from Istio to FortiWeb and then to our product page application. And finally, we can use a typical SQL injection URL to check that FortiWeb is actually blocking the attacks. So that's it. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the video.